Okay, quick update on image I've built with a track mode. This is version 0.4 and essentially it's just another front end for RetroPie that currently uses Emulation Station, but with this process you can kind of see a proof of concept that you can use other front ends if you want to. So it's quite easy to sort of swap out and add your own. There's the splash screen for a track mode. Like I say, I've done a few iterations of this, so there's other versions. This is version 0.4 as it says at the bottom of the screen there. And also on this build I've put some pre-configured artwork on the image, so this means that you can get some fairly high quality imagery without having to scrape, and it's often better than the scrape version as well. So you've got an option there to continue to scrape as normal or use this image and have a lot of pre-built image there. And it's been obtained kindly from Progetto Snaps and also omegaman on the Attract Mode forums for the wheel art. So you can download this manually yourself, but this has already been provided and full credits are all in the README file for the images. I'll just quickly run through how you use this interface. And as I say, you don't have to use this build at all. You can just download RetroPie and follow a couple of wiki instructions, and you can put a track mode on top of whatever your setup is. So you don't have to sort of cancel your build or anything like that. You can easily just put it on top, really. So it's a good way of getting another front end. And the track mode isn't the only front end out there. There's obviously Emulation Station as well. There's I think one called RetroFE, and there's Mame Station, and a few others I think. So you probably see a good range coming up for the Pi soon. Obviously this is geared for the Raspberry Pi. I'm using a Raspberry Pi 3, and because in a track mode I do tend to use some of the video snaps, and the video snaps are included in this image as well, so as are static snaps, so you can always flip between the two there as well depending on what layout you might use. Yeah, anyway, so this is what you'll get when you boot up. It's the layout here is just a basic layout to kind of emphasize that you're at a configuration screen really, and the top option won't do anything where it says press tab. It's just to remind you that to configure this and to get into it you need to press tab. Or I do leave my config in for my controller, and my controller is a iBuffalo USB joypad, which works great for a lot of purposes really, and that will automatically work just because I've left the settings in. But if you don't have that, then put the keyboard in, press tab, and you can start configuring this. The other option there, launch Emulation Station, will reboot the Pi, and it'll set you into Emulation Station, which is handy not least so you can get back into the front end of Emulation Station and use that if you want, but also it's a good way to configure controllers. And because a track mode will use the same underlying RetroPie configuration that Emulation Station does, it will also pick up those controller configs. So you shouldn't have any issues there. Obviously reboot will reboot it, just a standard reboot. Shutdown will shut down. And the last option there won't do anything either. That's just visual reference. If you do use one of my images, it's useful to know which one you're on so you can see which build that is. And you have got now in this version I've installed Kodi, so launch Kodi will launch Kodi, so you can do that from either this interface or Emulation Station. Also Daphne is installed from the experimental section in RetroPie, and that will run things like Dragon's Lair and that sort of game. So I've just pre-installed that one as well. But besides that, it's largely the same as a previous build. The key difference between version 3 and 4 of my builds and the previous ones are that this is not requiring X to run, so it's a different way of displaying the graphics effectively. The advantage in not using X is that it ties in with RetroPie much more easily. It lets a lot more of the configuration easily accessible to this interface. So you don't have to use a non-X version. The X version will still work here. You can start a track mode with typing X in it, attract, and it will still work. But the purpose of these builds really are to tie it in with RetroPie. And like I say, it's just a sort of proof of concept to show that it can be done. But you can configure it any which way you want really. There's no limit. Anyway, yeah, next step is tab to configure. I'm going to use the controller because I've already configured it, but tab will do exactly the same thing. So when I press select, that's what tab will bring up. That's your main menu. So a key point that you might want to go to pretty soon is controls. If you go in controls, there's all of the interface or all of the UI options for your controller in here. So there's quite a lot of control you can do. I don't map a lot of the buttons, but let's say, for example, I want to get the page down when I'm looking at a list. So I'll enter that page and I'll go to add input. Now at the moment there's no action, there's no input for that action, so I want to add an input, and it says press what you want. So I'll press one of the shoulder buttons to say I want page down on that button. I've done that. It says it's joy 0, so joy 0 interface and button 5. Fine. So now when I press button 5, that would then do that action for me. So you just go through this, and there you go. You see it's listed there now. You go through this and do all your buttons for your joypad, and you should be aware. It's fairly straightforward, and it makes it navigating a lot easier, and you don't need the keyboard, obviously. Okay, I'll just delete that whilst I'm there. Remove input. Okay. The next one, I don't tend to use a lot of these actually. Scraper's quite useful. Scraper will, as it suggests, go and scrape images from the games DB typically for your ROMs. But if you want, you can override that and say, I want to use my own imagery. So for example, on this build, with the artwork build version 4, and there is a non-artwork version 4 you'll see in the list. In this build, I provided that, so you can still scrape if you want. And I should be clear actually, the artwork is only for Mame. There's not much point in me trying to provide artwork for all of the consoles, because the name has to be the same, and I'd have to name it the same as your ROMs, and obviously that's unlikely to happen. You could rename the artwork to match your ROMs, but it's just hassle. So basically the artwork is for Mame only on here. Okay, so in Scraper you could say, when you do scrape, I want to scrape snaps. Mark, typically these ones are on, so it's those 4 I think. So when you scrape, you will scrape the snaps, which is a snapshot of the game in action typically. So it's sort of like an in-game picture. Marquees, which is usually more for arcade games. That's the strip or the logo at the top of the arcade machine. Then you've got flyers and box art, and wheel art, which is used in some of these layouts for scrolling purposes to select your game. And fan art, and yeah, if you want to get your videos for Mame, then you can scrape that as well. And the scraped images will get written to the attract mode config directory. It's separate from the specific user images, if you like, and I'll show you that in the path in a minute. Okay, that's Scraper. Plugins I don't tend to use, but there are plugins and there's a description under each one. I did add that plugin actually, the attract mode control menu, and it lets you get some extra features. It could be worth playing about with that. I haven't used it much. Yeah, plugins. Then you've got screensaver. That kicks in after 600 seconds. Yeah. And you can configure that. Intro is where it plays that movie that we saw when it started up. So you can put a different MP4. But do be aware, for ROMs, if you're looking at video snaps or this video that it plays on startup, it doesn't love like large high quality files. It will have a bit of a moment. The ones that work well typically seem to be under about the 2 meg mark-ish. More than that, and it can quite easily have a problem. Plus, do note, when it is playing a load of videos, it can get quite hot, particularly the Pi 3. I don't overclock mine, but it still gets quite hot. It's in a case which isn't helping the airflow, so just bear in mind, if you see a yellow square in the top right corner, then it's probably getting a bit hot, and you might want to put a heatsink on it, or just generally make it a bit cooler. Sound, I don't tend to go, that's sound options. Controls we've just done, and displays we'll come to after the emulators. Now emulators are effectively all of the systems that you want to configure. Now I've pre-configured some. You can delete these, you can edit them, you can add your own, and here's the list that are in there at the moment. So we'll take, I don't know, 2 or 3 as an example. So let's go for a standard console like Sega Mega Drive. We'll go in there, and all of these options that we see here are typical in all of the emulators. They all get these options that you can put in or leave blank. So the name, that's purely a text name. You can put whatever you want there. The executable, now like I say, I've built this to complement RetroPie, not to sort of do a completely separate build. The way I've configured this from version 3 onwards is to use the run command, which is how the emulators are kicked off from Emulation Station as well. So it's the same process basically. So the executable is run command. Now if I enter that, you'll see at the end there run command.sh. So it runs that, then let's get out of that, and then you pass it the arguments, which happen to be, it's usually this format, 0 space underscore cis underscore system name, and then the ROM file. That's typically the type of argument for that. ROM path is where the ROMs are on your system, and they should be on that path there if you're using RetroPie with a TrackMade. The extensions, now I've added those extensions in. Technically you should probably put some more of the uppercase versions of that, but I haven't. You can, it doesn't really matter. System identifier, now that's for the purpose of the scraper more than anything else as far as I'm aware, and that just means that if you choose to scrape these yourself rather than use downloaded imagery, it will find the right system and match them all for you. And then that's what you can see here. I'm going to use the GamesDB to do that scrape. I could additional import files, as it says below. You can get extra files that can support filters and other sort of more advanced areas. Typically I think that's more used in Mame, because you can do things then, say I want a filter to only show me 2-player games, or to only show me Capcom games, or to do quite a lot of really useful filtering like favourites and that sort of thing. But I tend to leave that blank except on Mame. Okay, minimum runtime, I don't know what that is. Set a minimum runtime, a TrackMade will wait after running this. Okay, well, it's as below, I'm not going to use it. Exit hotkey, well, because we're using usually RetroArch for the emulation, and RetroArch has got concept of hotkeys, I quit using the select and start as I normally would in RetroArch emulators. So I don't need a specific hotkey, but you could do this if you want. Then you've got 4 standard artworks. Now these are separate to the scraped images because these are user driven. These ones are in place because of what images you would put there, and this is where I've put them in for the main build on this particular image. But for Mega Drive I've left it blank. You could put images in these directories if you want, and it would override the scraped versions. So it's just the path for the user defined imagery really. Add artwork will add another layer of that manual element. So I think this is if a layout specifies a folder that doesn't exist in one of these 4. Maybe it's got another folder called manufacturer logo or something, I don't know. You could add that manually yourself there. Now this one, generate collection ROM list, is very important. That's the one that will effectively create the list of games for that emulator, and when it's got that list of games, then the display will be able to show it. If you don't run the generate collection ROM list, you won't see the emulator when you're looking through the displays. So this is what makes it appear. You need to run this for the given game. Okay, scrape artwork, we'll go and use those settings we put above for the game list DB, and delete will get rid of it. Delete won't delete your ROMs obviously, it just delete the configuration for this emulator. So that is the Sega Genesis one, Sega Mega Drive one, and let's do that now. If I generate the ROM list first, it shouldn't take too long. I didn't put many ROMs on here. You can see them scrolling along the bottom there. Okay, so that's done. Now if I go back under displays now, because I've generated a ROM list, you get a display for the Sega Mega Drive, and in there I can see by default it's chosen the basic layout, which is the one you can see in the background there for that script. We can change that, and you probably would want to change that. And let's say for example we go to, I don't know, a TrackMan. Now on a TrackMan, well actually for all layouts you can then go into the layout options and get quite detailed. So once you've found a layout you like, I would go into the options and see what sort of things you can tweak. But yeah, so I've changed the display to be a TrackMan. If I go back and back, I'm on the scripts now. I can scroll left and right to see each separate display. So if I scroll, there we go. I've got a track. This is the track mode theme, and I've got those games that I scrolled. Now all I've got at the moment is the ROM name. I haven't got any imagery at the top, on the side, or anything like that because I haven't put any on the image myself, and I also haven't scraped any, so I've not got anything except the ability to play the game. And I will check that. I'll just, if I fire that up now, there we go. And this would be a RetroArch based emulation, maybe Pico Drive. Anyway, but I can quit this. So if I hold down, select, and press start, there, back in the interface. So that works, but there's no pictures. So if I go back to the configuration, emulators, and Mega Drive, and I want to, because I'm not going to put any images manually on the card myself into these directories, I'm going to choose to scrape artwork, which puts it in a folder under the attract mode configuration. And the attract mode or most of the attract mode configuration can be found in your home directory in the folder called attract. Well, that is prefixed with a full stop to make it hidden. So you want a cd space dot attract, and then you get all of those folders. So I'm going to scrape the artwork, and that go off to the games DB. Again, it shouldn't take that long. And this will scrape everything that we specified in the scraper settings earlier. Obviously, there will be gaps, which is why it's not a bad idea to do some manual bits yourself. As you can see, you could spend a lot of time curating all of these emulators to get the videos and the images spot on, but this obviously should get you up and running. Okay, nearly there, and this then will all be in place, but if I go back here, I've still not got any images. Oh no, I have. Ignore that. I thought I had to create the ROM list again, but I don't. So now you can see this one's got a marquee, effectively, and a game logo, and a snapshot. A lot don't. Sonic 3 has. Sonic, that one has. That looks like that Amiga game that I can't remember by Bitmap Brothers. Anyway, Chaos Engine? Yeah, that's weird. Anyway, Sonic, blah, 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 blah. And you see, you can get imagery pretty quickly and easily. And like I say, that puts it in the attract mode folder. So that there. Now, you've got that layout, but you don't have to keep that layout. You can easily change it. You press select, you go in displays, and you might want to say, right, for that display, I don't want a trackman, I want Robospin. So go back, and you get the same data in a different layout, and you can see you've got your logos on the side there, which looks quite good, but it would be kind of odd, Mega Drive in an arcade machine for those games, so you might not want to choose that one. And you could even create a new display with the same ROM list with a different layout, which is probably not a great idea. Anyway, so yeah, there you go. Splathouse 2, Splathouse 3. Yeah, so it doesn't do bad on the scraping, but it usually does better on Mame because it's a lot more definable Mame. Okay, so that is that. I'm going to change that display to something that I recognise as different. Let's put one. Yeah, that's pretty clear that that's. Anyway, okay, so that's one system. That's another system technically. And all I'm doing now, pressing left and right, just scrolls through them. Okay, next one in emulators. What I'll do now, I'll probably go straight for the main stuff because the rest largely follow that Mega Drive approach. And Mame's slightly different here, particularly on this build because I've got the artwork. So there are three, or I've configured three Mame variants and an FBA. So Mame Advance, if you go in here, the only difference we're looking at really is here you can see it's the command argument is mame-adv Mame, so it's aware that you can run advanced Mame emulators, and this is the same as in an emulation station. For example, with advanced Mame you would choose, right, I'm either going to, actually I could show you probably, if I start, I'll show you when I get the ROMs. So when you get that run command, you press a button on the joypad and say, I want to use Advanced Mame 0.94, or no, I want to use Advanced Mame 1.4. Whichever you use, your ROMs must be the right set for that, obviously. Off the top of my head, I think if we did Mame libretro, and if we ran this with Mame 2003, that needs ROM set 0.78. So if you're not clear on ROM sets and emulators, please read the wiki about it. It's really useful, really accurate, and it helps so much with getting up and running. And that's quite a good example of a ROM set actually, the Mame 2003. It's pretty reliable all round and it plays quite a lot of different ones, but you don't have to use the libretro one, you can use the Mame for All one, because in Mame for All you get the variant of the sort of standalone one if you like, or the libretro based one, which means your RetroArch configuration will work. So I tend to be a bit lazy about it and try to use emulators that are RetroArch based, because then you only have to set your controllers up once, and typically there is a decent emulator for all of the systems under RetroArch, but that's by the by. Right, oh, an FBA. That'll run FBA next, or it'll run a standalone FBA for the Pi. So again, it's the same as emulation station. I don't really need to go into any detail. But the important thing is on, well, let's say libretro for example, the flyer art. Now this is the art that is in this image, the flyer art, the marquee, the snap and the wheel. And for the flyer art we've got it in a subfolder of where the ROM's set. That's just where I've chose to put it. You could put it anywhere. You could change these and move the imagery. It doesn't have to be there, but that's where I've set it on this example. And because all the images there, you don't need to scrape. You could scrape this if you want, but the priority, I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying, is the user uploaded imagery. So these sets here, if you did scrape, it would look here first. If it didn't exist here, then it would look in the scrape directory. So that's where you can see that. And this means that all you've got to do is copy your ROMs across to home Pi RetroPie ROMs Mame libretro, and then create your ROM list here, and it will quite happily find all that imagery. And what I've done here under Advance and under Mame for All is I've used the same artwork folders as Mame libretro, because although they're different emulators for Mame, the artwork isn't going to be any different. You know, I don't know, Gallagher on one system isn't going to have a different picture of Gallagher on another system. It's the same file name. So I don't see the harm in reusing the artwork folders for this purpose. Otherwise, you'll be using gigs of data for just duplication, really. And I think at the moment, the imagery on this is probably in the region of 15 gig or so, maybe a bit more. Is a lot of images, not least because the flyers are pretty high quality, and there's video snaps as well, so there is a lot of imagery. Hopefully I'll find somewhere that I can host this image so you can download it. Okay, so those are all pre-configured, and you don't need to change any of these. Here I have put an additional input file. I've put a path where you can find your files like end players and category versions, so you can do filtering, so you feel free to play about with that. And I have put the scraping settings in here, but you shouldn't need to use it on this build, because on 0.4 with the artwork, because I've already uploaded them here, but you could scrape if you want to. So now, because I've got the imagery on here, and under Mame libretro I've put some ROMs, that's where I've put mine. I'm going to generate the ROM list. It shouldn't take too long. I've got about maybe, I don't know, 100 ROMs or so. So that's just running through it, checking checking what the ROMs are and where the imagery is, creating a text file. And now if I go back, should see under displays, Mame Retro. And Mame being arcade, let's change the layout to an arcade based one. And a good one is, I think probably my favourite one is the Robespin Beaten You. Okay, back, scroll, and that's the Mega Drive one we've got. And if I go that way again, okay, and there you can see we've got a fully populated, without having to scrape anything because the images are already there, set of ROMs. This one's not a bad example because we've got the wheel image on the right there, Golden Axe, Revenge of Death Adder marquee at the top, and you've got a video snap playing. And in the background you've got the flyer showing as well, doing a sort of pan and scan effect with some scan lines. So if I scroll down, it should quite happily. Okay, so this one no doubt hasn't got a flyer, so it's just doing the default. And then if they haven't got a marquee as well, you've got a default arcade at the top. And that one has got a flyer. But you get the idea. Put the artwork there and the theme will quite happily see it. And again, I can scroll through back to the different systems, scripts, and the Mega Drive one that we had up earlier. Scrolling down this one, because the video snaps are playing and you've got that pan and scan going on with a fairly large flyer artwork, it can feel a little bit slow. Well, not necessarily slow, but slower than some of the other ones. So for example, if I change this layout to, let's have a look. I think coin ops is fairly quick. If I do coin ops, it just feels a bit quicker to scroll through these. Obviously it looks different. But yeah, you've got the option obviously. And I'll just send that one back to, let's have a look. What was extras? I've forgotten that one. Okay. But yeah, there you go. Hopefully you'll find that image useful, but also it kind of gives you a quick overview of how a track mode works if you just want to install that yourself. I am using it on a Raspberry Pi, but a track mode works on lots of platforms, including Windows, so you can use that as your emulator front end on different systems quite happily. But this build, I'm not sure what else I can add to the build, so there probably won't be any more unless you know, I've missed something that's really useful for people. But or maybe I'll do a new one if a new version of a track mode comes out or something like that. But don't forget, you can quite happily put this over your existing RetroPie build with these sort of settings, and you can use X if you want, if you don't necessarily want all of the functionality that RetroPie brings. And with the run command feature, a lot of people for whatever reason do prefer just running it under X on the Raspberry Pi, which also works as well. And that's it. Any questions, please put them in the comments below. I'll try to put the relevant links in the description, and hope it's helped. Thanks for watching.